A home. It's something we all need. But for too many, having a safe place to make a home is out of reach. The challenges can seem insurmountable. And yet, each and every day, people are coming together to provide safe, quality, and affordable housing for those in need. Welcome to Let's Talk Housing. I'm your host, Sarah Goldvine. Join us as we listen to and learn from people in British Columbia who are creating strong, inclusive communities where everyone can thrive.
Hi, and welcome to Let's Talk Housing. I'm your host, Sarah Goldvine. To kick off season 4, we are joined by a very special guest, Minister of Housing and Municipal Affairs, Ravi Kahlon. Minister Kahlon has represented Delta North as MLA since 2017, a position he was just re-elected to in October of 2024. After serving in several cabinet roles, in December 2022, Ravi was appointed as Minister of Housing. And then following his re-election this fall, he was asked by the Premier to take on an expanded role as Minister of Housing and Municipal Affairs. As we begin, I'd like to acknowledge we're recording today on the territories of the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh, whose people have stewarded these lands since time immemorial. For transparency, this episode is being recorded in December of 2024 and reflects the issues and priorities of that time. Minister Kahlon, welcome back to Let's Talk Housing.
Sarah, thanks so much. Thanks for inviting me back. I look forward to the conversation.
Well, it's great to have you here. Congratulations on your re-election. It's an exciting time. We saw during the election campaign, certainly housing continues to be one of the most pressing, if not the most pressing issue for people here in British Columbia. You now have this expanded portfolio that includes municipal affairs as well as housing. How do you see the intersection there coming together between the two elements of your portfolio?
Yeah, I think it's a natural fit because in the end, what we all want is the same thing. That we want vibrant, healthy communities that have, great amenities. We want the rec centers. We want the parks. We want the green space. But we desperately want the housing, whether that's some of the more deeply affordable housing or whether it's the more closer to market rent. We need everything. And so with this new role, the most exciting part is, I'm back. I get to continue to do some of the work that I'm doing, that the ministry was doing, the BC Housing was doing. So we get to work together on kind of landing some of the big things we're doing. So a lot of the legislation, the changes that we brought in, seeing it all come through. But now we get to add the carrot to all of the work as well, which is the important dollars for infrastructure to make sure that we're making sure that, communities are fully supported, And so I'm learning some of the municipal affairs pieces. I'm doing a bit of a crash course on it. But so far, it's exciting. It's a great team. And just keen to get back to work.
So now you have more than a couple of years, barely a couple of years under your belt with the housing file. When you look back on that, what lessons did you learn and how are you bringing those into your expanded portfolio?
Yeah, there's a lot of lessons and some challenges. I mean, people in the sector know it as well, and perhaps there's a shift in our society, whether it's British Columbia, North America, wide, every community. I was talking to a representative from Colorado, was up here. They're kind of equivalent to their Minister of Housing. And we were talking, and we actually had to chuckle because it's the exact same issues being dealt with. How do we get buy-in from communities to ensure that we continue to support vulnerable people? How do we get buy-in from people in community for them to understand that housing is central? It's key. Once you got people housed, you've got some stability, you can get them the other supports you need. So the lessons I've learned is that I have to be patient. And that's tough for me because my nature is 0 to 100. So I have to be patient in communities. But at the same time, I think there's a real urgency. I heard it in the election. People say, well, why are young people so frustrated? And I say they're frustrated because they don't see a pathway. They don't see the pathway that their families and their parents had. And so, I'm really excited to be able to do two things. One, to land the changes we made, to actually see them being enacted in community, even those late stragglers that didn't do it, but now are starting to do it. And then second is the 2.0. because it was an important step to bring things to where it is now. But there are now additional things that need to happen. Maybe they're not as edgy as they were as the first pieces, but we have more work to do because at the end of the day, nothing is more frustrating for people than having 5, 6, 7 years waiting for an approval for housing. It just is unacceptable, especially when it's affordable housing. And so, yeah, I'm excited. I've got some ideas, and I'm sure people are keen to share ideas, and those are always welcome.
Well, maybe you can let us know about some of those ideas. I mean, I think our listeners would be really interested to know what are the priorities that you're going to be focused on in the next few months ahead. Is there anything that you can give us a sneak peek into?
I would say that the most immediate thing that I'm going to be focusing on is a couple things. One is around infrastructure. How do we ensure that infrastructure is there in communities, whether it's water or sewer or whether it's the other amenities, but at the same time ensure that projects can still get built? And so it's a big topic. Obviously, it's a national conversation, and so that'll be the most immediate. I'm going to be meeting with Minister Fraser and federal counterparts, meeting with Metro Vancouver mayors and mayors on the island and the interior, just talking about this very question. The additional pieces I would say is, the small scale multi-unit changes that we brought in have been adopted by 94% of the communities, but some haven't. So putting some focus on the communities that haven't to make sure that everyone's doing their part. Same with transit-oriented development. And then the next phase of changes I think we need to bring is not only ensuring that communities made the basic changes, but that they are making the kind of the more detailed changes. For example, small scale multi-unit. And a lot of the listeners might be, bigger not-for-profits, and maybe they're operating in a different space. But, we've got a lot of housing that we need, for example, for new residents. And I think the 6-unit space is a really exciting space for folks to get into, smaller projects, more accessible. And so how do we ensure that we allow proper heights and setbacks and parking to make that? How do we ensure that we're allowing people to have strata in those units? So lots of energy going to be spent there. And we have some work to do with our not-for-profit partners as well. There's so much good work happening in community. And my concern is always about how do we ensure that the services for people are being provided to them and that they're feeling the change. But also, how do we ensure that communities understand what we're doing and why we're doing it? Because what jumped out of me looking at the U.S. election and our election, I shared that at Housing Central, is that it was surprising to me how many people don't understand what's happening or what not-for-profits are doing and what communities are doing to address the challenges. They see the news, they see people are struggling, but they are not seeing the hope. They're not seeing the impacts that many of our partners are making on the ground. So those are just some of the focuses in the next, I'd say, 3-4 months. And of course, we're waiting for our mandate letters from the Premier on bigger changes. And when I have that, I'll be able to share the rest of the changes in a bigger way.
Yeah, we look forward to that. In the meantime, though, as you mentioned, like there's a lot underway. There's a long list of to-dos, a long list of priorities, and also people are feeling the pressure now. So you're out on doorsteps, you're in community events, particularly over the last few months. What do you tell people who are frustrated and struggling with housing affordability? What do you tell them?
Well, yeah, it's really tough because people have now become more conditioned to get the result right away. Like they wish there was an app for this. You just press a button, it would be done, but it's not. It's housing takes time. Today we were at the opening of 337 units in South Vancouver, 220 Indigenous housing units. I think Macola will be operating, and just over 120 co-ops. And, if I were to go to people in my community and say, we need more co-ops and we need more Indigenous housing, they would say, that's amazing. And today we're opening them. What I always say to folks is housing takes time, unfortunately. We have to remove barriers. And I think the bigger conversation we have to have is how do we separate the need for housing from who actually is being housed? Because, if you say this housing is for veterans, people line up and say, oh, that's great. You say this housing is for nurses and doctors. I say, oh, that's great. The moment you say this is for lower income folks, or it's for people who are vulnerable, or people who are supportive housing, the mood changes, the tone changes. And so that makes me sad, but at the same time, it reminds me that it's our responsibility collectively to educate the population, to help alleviate concerns when there's genuine concerns there. So the things I've learned along the campaign, I think will help, well, not only myself, but my colleagues will help us be informed. And then last thing I'll say is people don't have patience anymore. They want to see results. And I think that there's a real opportunity to really push, especially with our local government partners, to get to a place where we can get decisions and certainty faster. And so I know that's a long-winded answer, but I watched the U.S. election closely, and obviously I was part of our election and seeing the elections around the country happen. And I'm more determined than ever that we collectively can make progress. We have to make progress, and people have to see it and feel it in their communities.
One thing I'd like to dig in there is, I mean, you touched on the importance of hope and also the challenge of stigma, particularly when it comes to delivering housing. And we here at Let's Talk Housing know that you're someone who understands the power of storytelling. Why do you think stories are so important for really sharing with British Columbians the work that is underway, and why that's important for community?
Well, stories are key to who we are as human beings. You go back as far as you want. Stories have been how we have connected people's lives to the things that are happening around them. And Indigenous communities use stories to keep history going. And so I think it's just foundational to who we are. And, I feel like saying this too often to people, which is we need to tell the stories. The young woman I met with in Vernon who is, proudly helping other vulnerable people when she was herself sleeping in a tent a couple of years ago. She's working for the not-for-profit that supported her, People need that sense of hope because when they get to the point where there's no hope, they say, well, why are we even doing this? And then that fatigue kicks in. And the only way we can counter fatigue in society, which is actually, it's there, is with hope that the things we're doing are not necessarily that things are getting better, but that the solutions that are being brought forward are helping some people. And so, this podcast, the stories that other people have, not-for-profits, we want to hear them. We want them telling them in public and in the media, because, for a long time, there was a thought amongst some partners that if we're just quiet, we just stay out of people's way and we don't bother them, they don't bother us. And that's just not going to happen. That's just not the reality of the world we live in. We have to be proactive, and either we tell the story or the story will be told about us. You're going to see a big focus from us on not only on more funding, not only on more dollars, but continuously creating the buy-in. We cannot solve the housing crisis without affordable housing, without serious investment in affordable housing. And so you'll hear me a lot talking about the private sector because they have an important role in it, but we cannot lose, especially with the federal election coming up, we cannot lose the importance of the debate and the discussion to be including affordable housing. And so that'll be the big thing I'll be doing leading up to the federal election for sure.
Love that focus on story. It's going to be a few months ahead, right? Like it's going to be a challenging few months ahead and few years ahead, in particular, because of, as you mentioned, just the challenge with delivering the scale of housing that is underway. It does take time. So when you're looking ahead, how are you going to stay energized to really continue to take on this challenge for British Columbians?
Yeah, it's the people you meet that keep you energized, and the side emails you get. Like I get so many emails. I try to read as many of them as I can, but people are like, I'm struggling and can you get me this? Can you get me into a housing? And then, so it just reminds you got a lot of work to do. And so that provides energy. And I'm just an energetic person by nature. My teen hates that, but I'm always like, let's go, go, go. So, the privilege and the honor of having this role is that I'm able to actually make a difference. And so while the moment is here and while I'm in this job, that's what I'll be doing, and just excited to keep going. And, it's not perfect. People who are listening to this know that there's a lot of work to be done, that there's still a lot of pressure points in our communities. But I do believe that if we work collectively, we'll be able to address it. And by the way, I get messages from people across North America, and the consistent message I hear is the work that's happening in British Columbia is leading edge. And then they're not talking about the government. They're talking about not-for-profits. They're talking about BC Housing. They're talking about thought leaders that we have out here. And so, I think part of our work also has to be picking up our head and reminding ourselves once in a while that there's some amazing things happening here, and then putting our heads down and getting back to work again.
Thank you, Minister. I'm going to squeeze in one final question. You mentioned you're a father. When you look ahead to the type of society that you want your son to have when he's your age, what do you hope the legacy will be for the work that's underway right now in housing for his generation?
Wow, you went heavy there. My kid, with any kid, child, they know how to push your buttons. And so he'll come home and I'll be like, "Have you solved the housing crisis? What are you guys doing over there?" And so I would say that when I hear people say, "Oh, the dream of homeownership is dead," or "I'll never be able to afford a place here, rent a place here," I think that is what I want to be able to change. I'd love for in 4 years from now, and I know this is hopeful, but 4 years from people saying, I see hope. I see that there's a pathway. I see that we're making progress. And I know it won't be easy because we have a lot of headwinds. Where there's always a new thing coming at us, a new curveball. But, today when we were opening up these new units, it reminded me the investments that we made in 2018 are now finally starting to open up. And it's finally coming through. The phase one of the community housing fund stuff is coming through. And then we know there's a lot more coming behind that. And so we're going to be able to see more and more people coming in and getting into housing. And I think, making sure that people have that hope in 4 years is what I'm looking forward to.
That is a wonderful message of hope to be leaving us on today, Minister. Thank you so much for carving out the time in your schedule to join us here on the podcast today. Let's talk again soon.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me, Sarah. And I want to say a big thank you to you. You've been a big part of the BC Housing team. I don't want to get you emotional, but just to say, since I've come in this role, I've known you on the other side of the screen or the meetings, and the work you've done, the contribution you've made has been tremendous. And I know you're not done. You're still in the housing sector space, and your new organization is lucky to have you. But I want to say a big thank you on behalf of the province, the people that perhaps don't have a chance to say this, but thank you for the work you've done. And hopefully you're doing a podcast at your new place as well, and you'll invite me.
Oh, thank you so much, Minister. It's honestly, it's an honor to be able to do this work, and in particular to be able to do it for somebody who understands the power of work that includes story and communications. So thank you so much.
We're going to miss you, but you're not going far.
I'm not going far.
To learn more about BC Housing, including how to apply for subsidized housing in British Columbia, visit bchousing.org. You can also find us on Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, and X. If you enjoyed this episode, give us a rating. This will help others find Let's Talk Housing and join the conversation. You can subscribe to Let's Talk Housing on Apple, Spotify, or wherever you listen to your podcasts.